Are there any motions to take note of answers? Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I rise to take note of all answers provided to coalition questions. There are 5 major problems with the Australian economy right now, and in the next 5 minutes I'll explain each of them. Number 1, inflation is now rising on the Albanese Labor government's watch. ABS data released today shows that annual inflation has hit 3.2% in headline terms, and even that miserable figure of rising inflation hides some shocking underlying results, including 23.6% increases in electricity prices in this country over the last year. That is misery for Australian families and households who are struggling to make ends meet under Labor's cost of living crisis. Perhaps the worst thing about this shocking inflation result today is the implications it will have for interest rates. Market economists are already saying forget about any further interest rate cuts this year at the November or December RBA board meetings, and that Australians should even prepare themselves for the possibility that the next move in interest rates will be up and not down. This is terrible news for mortgage holders who are already paying up to $20,000 more a year on an average mortgage on Labor's watch because inflation and interest rates are out of control. Number 2, inflation is now rising, not falling. It's at 4.5%, about 1% higher when this government came to office 3 years ago. That means thousands of Australians who want to work but can't find a job, who are out of the workforce, who are relying on support from the government and from the community, who would much rather have a job to support themselves. That's about 1% higher than when this government came to office 3 years ago. That's thousands of families who are finding it harder to make ends meet because unemployment on this government's watch is rising, and we shouldn't be surprised given the policies they've pursued. Number 3, debt is rising on this government's watch. It is forecast to hit $1.2 trillion in gross terms by the end of this parliamentary term, according to the government's own predictions and forecasts in their own budget. They also forecast that there will be 10 years of deficits to come over the next decade on this government's watch. And I really think the government and Senator Gallagher needs to update her talking points when she continues to boast of Labor surpluses. We don't have any Labor surpluses anymore. We have Labor deficits as far as the eye can see. Number 4, all of this is caused by spending which is out of control. Spending is up on this government's watch to 40-year highs as a proportion of our economy outside the pandemic. You have to go back to 1986-87 before you find a government that is spending as much as this government is as a proportion of the economy, and their record on spending is getting worse every year that they're in office. In Senate estimates, it was revealed that spending in the last financial year increased by 5.5%, or about 4 times the rate that the economy is growing, and Treasury officials had to reluctantly admit that the government is in breach of its own rubbery fiscal rules, which said that it should bank most of the revenue upgrades that it receives and that spending should be restrained until government debt as a proportion of the GDP peaks. Well, government debt as a proportion of GDP is rising, and as is spending. Finally, Australians are paying higher taxes than they otherwise should. Taxes are up on this government's watch. Treasury officials admitted in Senate estimates that the average taxpayer will be paying an increase of 20.6% of their salary from now to 23.6% of their salary by the end of the forward estimates, by the end of the medium term, And so what that means is that taxes are rising. Australians are paying thousands of dollars more in taxes than they would have because this government is allowing bracket creep to take more and more of the hard-earned income that you earn and taking more of that to cover the spending that they're responsible for. But even these high levels of taxes, which are at 25-year highs as a proportion of the economy, are not enough to cover the higher spending on this government's watch. This is a government which has benefited from a revenue boom. $370 billion of more revenue has been collected on this government's watch than they expected to in 2022, and they have squandered the benefits of that, now with higher deficits and rising debt again. Australians are paying the price for this government's economic mismanagement, and they are being called out for it, even by independent, respected commentators like the Reserve Bank Governor, who has observed recently that spending on this government's watch is growing very quickly, that there are substantial deficits to come. The government needs to stop, reassess, change their reckless economic policies and put Australia back on a path to prosperity.